everybody. This is Terry from the Pre-Mom team here live with Mikayla Dalton, Fertility Awareness Method Instructor. Welcome back.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
I'm excited because we're doing a fun one on fertility myths. We've picked out 10 for you today. And if you're watching live, please feel free to ask follow-up questions. And we're just going to jump right in. All right, let me pull this up here. Looks like we have some people on already too. Awesome. The first one is, there's a 25% chance of conceiving each cycle when you're trying to conceive.
That's false. So I need a buzzer. False.
Love that.
It depends how you want to look at the statistics, but 25% a cycle isn't really helpful to anybody. So if you happen to have sex on your very most fertile day of the cycle, so say you only have sex one time that cycle and it's on your very most fertile day, the chance of pregnancy from that one act of intercourse on your very most fertile day will hover between the 25 or 30%-ish. Okay. If you are just having sex randomly or indiscriminately through a cycle, that 25% is kind of true. But if you are using Pre-Mom and tracking your cycles or using a fertility awareness-based method, and you are targeting your very most fertile days, and so that's around about the day of ovulation and a few days before that, around about then, and depending on how close intercourse is to ovulation, you could have a chance on any particular day of, 4 or 5%, 10%, around 15% statistically, up to that 25 or 30%. But if you're having sex multiple times, then those kind of stack in a special statistical way, because the more chances you're giving yourself, the more likely it is. So you have 30% from the very best day, but you also have a chance from the day before. That adds in a special statistical way. I won't get into the math, don't worry. So nobody likes that, right?
That's fascinating. This is great.
So you can have a much better chance than just 25%, just depending on what days you're targeting and how many times you're doing it.
Awesome. All right. And then your next one is sperm live 3 days.
Some sperm do. So no, that's still false. That's general. All right. So sperm survival is one of my favorite topics. I know that's a weird topic and I don't bring it up at dinner parties or anything, but it's really interesting because sperm need some conditions to survive. They need warmth, they need moisture, they need the right pH environment to be in. Sperm outside the body are going to only survive for up to about 20 minutes typically. The seminal fluid dries up, they die off. Inside the female body, when a woman is not in her fertile phase, her body is relatively hostile to sperm, actually. So the environment of the vagina is acidic. The sperm don't do well in that. They die pretty quickly. And so in a hostile female body environment, they might last about 2 hours, up to about 2 hours. In the presence of a hospitable environment, sperm live much, much longer. And so that's where the 3 days is coming in. Usually you'll see the range like 3 to 5 days. 3 to 5 days is the range. We've seen 5 days in vitro sperm, like in a little dish in a special solution, to see how we've seen them survive that long when artificial insemination has been a thing. And then they've checked the woman's reproductive tract and they're like, hey, there are motile sperm still here. That's impressive. I've seen charts, fertility awareness-based charts, where ovulation has been pretty well identified and narrowed down to a 1 or 2 day window. That indicate a sperm survival of even longer than 5 days. I've seen a 6-day sperm survival charts. I've seen multiple ones of those. So there are some that seem to be better, But kind of tracking this kind of thing is really difficult to do, like medically speaking, scientifically speaking. So I think statistically, there's something like a 1%, less than 1% chance of sperm surviving 6.8 days. So a biostatistical approach. So 3 days is just like, yes, like a lot of them will die off sooner than that if it's the wrong time, the wrong environment. Some of them will last much longer than that if it's a really good environment. So some couples have really good combined fertility. The woman's body is very hospitable to sperm when she's in the fertile phase, and they could easily last that 5 days.
Wow. That's awesome. All right, next one. Female sperm are slower than male sperm.
Oh, yeah. False. This one's actually been checked. False. But this was a theory for a long time, that sperm with an X chromosome compared to sperm with a Y chromosome, there are some differences in them. Some may be bigger or smaller. The way they travel can be different. So sperm with a Y chromosome, and please, I hope no one's taking this as a navigational kind of reflection on males and females, but sperm with a Y chromosome tend to travel more in a straight line than sperm with an X chromosome. However, they have actually been timed. So this was a theory that started a long time ago. I think it might have been Dr. Shettles from memory. But recently they've actually timed the speed of the differing sperm, and female sperm are just as fast as male sperm. So yes. Yeah. So that's good to know. Like that theory it hasn't withstood the sort of standards, the changing standards of science over time. So yeah.
Okay. Number 4, you should wait at least a year of trying to conceive before seeking medical help.
This one's partly true. So that's the usual advice. Just, generally speaking, if you go to your random doctor, they'll tell you to try for a year, and if there's no success, come on back. That's usually the standard approach. They'll say 6 months if you're over a certain age. So if you're looking at being advanced maternal age, they'll have a look earlier, because there's a bit more of a time crunch going on. And here's the really important thing. If you are tracking your cycles using a reliable method of tracking your cycles, so not just a calendar prediction only, if you're tracking your cycles to identify your window of ovulation, and if you can confirm ovulation, that's ideal. And you have been trying for 6 cycles with no success, that's at the point that I would be advising the people that I work with, my own clients, I would be advising them to seek some medical investigation, help at that point. And the reason for that is that approximately 90% of couples will conceive over a year of random trying. So if you're not charting and you just you're saying, well, we're not using birth control, I'm not going to chart or anything, we'll just see what happens, and you go a year and you haven't gotten pregnant yet, then you're in about that 10% of people that don't within that year. So about 90% of couples will conceive that way over a year. For fertility charting, if you're targeting those fertile days that I spoke about a bit before, and you go 6 cycles without conceiving, you're about in that 10% again. So approximately 90% of couples who are using a fertility awareness-based approach to try to conceive will succeed within the first 6 cycles. So at that point, you're in the same situation as somebody not charting who's been trying for a year, so that you're justified in asking for some assistance. Yeah.
That's a great comparison. Thank you. All right, next one. Number 5, sex or semen can induce ovulation.
That's actually kind of terrifying to me. false, thank goodness. So in the animal kingdom, looking at mammals, you can divide mammals up into two categories. In this particular respect, you have induced ovulators and spontaneous ovulators.
Oh, wow.
And human women are spontaneous ovulators. So there are some animal species that are induced ovulators. So the presence of the male factor, like seminal fluid, the presence of seminal fluid inside the female of the species will actually induce her to ovulate. I think camels or
I
llamas.
was going to ask which ones.
I think camels or llamas are see, I'm not a veterinarian, so yeah, dromedaries. I think so. Because this has been observed in some animal species, there has been a theory that for women that sometimes like having sex or semen or orgasm will cause them to ovulate. Like we know that it does in some animals, but we do not. So yeah, we're very definitely spontaneous ovulators. And what that means is that our body does its own thing on its own timetable, and it can't be induced by having sexual intercourse.
Great.
So,
that would have been great for trying to conceive, but I can see how trying to avoid would be a problem.
Right. And I think what sometimes happens is that it might be because our bodies are primed for reproduction, like at a sort of very basic evolutionary level. I think all sorts of things can go a little wacky here and there. But in general, we're primed to reproduce. So that you might find that a lot of couples might tend if there's no hormonal contraception involved, which could affect the woman's hormonal feedbacks. They may tend to feel more desire or to feel like engaging in sex as the woman is getting more fertile. So it might seem that when you have sex, like you might not have had sex for a while, then you have sex and you get pregnant. And you're like, I bet it just made me ovulate when, but actually it was because you were getting close to ovulation that you felt like it. So that might be kind of like a bit of a anecdotal kind of bias thing where you notice, oh, well, that's interesting because, yeah, but fortunately or unfortunately, as the case may be, our bodies will ovulate in their own time, and they can't be made to ovulate by having sex.
Right. What is that? Correlation, but not causation?
That's right. Yeah.
All right, number 6. If trying to avoid, speaking of trying to avoid, infertility charting, you're only considered potentially fertile on the 6 days of your fertile window.
Oh yeah, no, like if only it worked like that. So a lot of women, if they've used fertility charting successfully to try to conceive, a lot of women are more open to use it to try to avoid pregnancy afterwards. So like, this was really useful and I like this. And when you're trying to conceive, your main goal is to identify that fertile window where the woman's body is hospitable to sperm and you come around ovulation, and to target the most fertile days. So that's pretty easy. Your fertile window is technically about 6 days. But when you're trying to avoid pregnancy, it's a whole different mindset and a whole different approach with fertility charting. So you're not just trying to avoid the most fertile days. Like, you do want to avoid those days. You want to identify those and say we need to be careful on these days because we don't want to make a baby right now. But you also want to be careful of the sort of edge days. And we don't pinpoint ovulation to the exact day. If we all had at-home ultrasounds, and an ultrasound tech, then we might be able to pinpoint ovulation to one exact day. But even with our best at-home technologies, like the hormone tests and things like that, the at-home hormone tests, even with that, you're usually pinpointing ovulation in a window of about 3 days, So there's a little bit of fuzziness involved in the biology and being able to monitor the biology. So you end up actually having way more potentially fertile days when you're trying to avoid pregnancy than you have with potentially fertile days to try to conceive a pregnancy, because you're trying to avoid any of those days on the edge there. Yeah, it's funny. It does actually make a big difference.
Yes. Okay, how about number 7? Let's see, where are we? Okay. Elevating your legs after sex helps conception.
No, that's probably false. We have no good evidence that sperm need the extra help of us to help them against gravity. Sperm are microscopic. They swim very fast for their size. They're deposited right up near the cervix. They don't have far to go. You don't really need to do anything much to help them. The seminal fluid will create like a globby, gelatinous puddle, I'm going to call it, up near the cervix. Having sex actually changes the pH of the vaginal canal to make it more conducive to sperm for a little while. That little globby puddle up near the cervix that the seminal fluid creates is protective of the sperm as well. That isn't going to come out if you stand up straight away. So you will see, like, you'll feel things come out. You'll feel a liquid come out if you stand up straight away, but that's kind of the excess. It's not needed at that point. If you're in the fertile phase, your own vaginal environment has changed to become more hospitable to sperm as well. So you have this fertile cervical fluid that is good for the sperm to swim in, and protective and nutritive to it. There's really nothing more you can add to that. However, I've said this before, it doesn't hurt. So if you want to, and if it makes you feel better, like doing something, if you feel like you're helping, and it might, we have no evidence to suggest that it does. None whatsoever, really. But it's not going to hurt. So if you want to, it's not my thing. I would probably start feeling silly after about 1.5 seconds. But, you can do it, and it's not going to hurt.
To each your own.
Yeah.
Okay, number 8. How about hot tubs and tight shorts for men? Are they a problem for fertility?
This is a true. This is a true because the sperm live in an environment that is very well regulated temperature-wise. So they do much better in a certain temperature range. So very, very hot environments can actually make it more difficult for the sperm to be healthy. To have like a healthy level of sperm that are behaving as like at their optimal kind of measurement. So like really tight pants, hot tubs, if you do that a lot, putting your laptop on your lap if you're a guy can actually, because you know how hot they get, can actually increase the temperature of the testes. What else? Oh, another one that might be difficult for sperm is cycling, if you're a serious cyclist. Mm-hmm. That as well, because you're wearing those tight lycra shorts and you're sitting on something and exercising. So all of those things can actually impair sperm health. How much that actually reflects onto an impaired ability to conceive, like impaired fertility or virility, if you want to call that for the male, I don't actually know. So if we need to do a follow-up, I can do some research and come back to if we know whether these changes to the sperm environment that aren't particularly healthy for the sperm are actually bad enough to affect conception chances. Because human biology is pretty resilient. I can check on that aspect for you. But in the meantime, if you're trying to conceive, then you want to encourage the man to like consider boxer shorts rather than the tighty whities, or and keep that laptop off his lap. Yeah.
Give it the best chance.
Yeah.
Okay, we got two more. Number 9 is female orgasm during pregnancy is important for conception.
Well, during pregnancy, it would be too late for conception. So,
oh, right, that should probably be trying to conceive.
Yeah. So I figured it doesn't seem so. So this is a really common story to be put about. It's been a concept for a long time. There's actually a research study. So I actually have it here in front of me. And bear with me for the academic language for a minute. So the title of this study, I would just say girls just want to have fun. But that's not the real title. The real title is, can the controversy about the putative role of the human female orgasm in sperm transport be settled with our current physiological knowledge of coitus? So it's not a very catchy title, but they are looking at that exact question. Because this has been a common idea for a long time, that the uterine contractions that a woman has that are induced by oxytocin during orgasm would assist the sperm in traveling up through the uterus into the fallopian tubes. And they found that, having looked at mainly peer-reviewed articles and books and things like that, they found that all of the experiments and observations done so far have not been undertaken in women who are sexually aroused. So that may have been an ethical thing, which leads to a study design flaw. So when a woman is aroused, her actual the actual positioning of her physical positioning of the internal organs actually changes. It has what we call vaginal tenting, and the cervix and uterus is kind of lifted up in a way. And if you're trying to observe the effect of uterine contractions without the uterus in the position it would be in the natural world, you don't know if that makes any valid conclusions or not. They've done studies also when they inject women with oxytocin, and these women weren't aroused either. And the oxytocin they injected was way more than the woman would naturally produce on her own as well. So basically, the studies we have that suggest it could help aren't good enough to actually come to that conclusion. They're very flawed, and they ignore some of the things that could make encouraging more sperm actually disadvantageous. So basically, the bulk of the reported evidence favors the conclusion that the female orgasm with its oxytocin and all of that stuff has little or no effective role in the transport of sperm. So, I mean, I don't want to discourage anybody from encouraging the female orgasm. And again, it probably doesn't hurt. But yeah, it's been a really common theory, I guess you could say, a really common theory for a long time, but we have no evidence for it whatsoever, really. And the evidence that we have is poor and mixed. And so no, that's basically, as far as science is concerned, until you're proving that something is, then you can't claim that it is. Yeah.
Right. Oh. All right, and the last one that we have here is sexual position mattering for conception. Does it matter?
These have been so tricky. So, false.
And we did have an addendum to that. The person was asking, what if I have a retroverted uterus?
Okay, that's a good question. There's a lot of, because a retroverted uterus is really common. The estimates as to how common it is range from 1 in 5, 1 in 4 to 1 in 3. So anywhere between 20 and 30% of women will have a retroverted uterus. And for those who don't know what it is, I'm going to turn to the side for a minute. Usually, so at the top of the vaginal canal, you have the cervix and the uterus tilts forward towards your belly. Okay. When a uterus is retroverted, it actually tilts back towards the back. It's considered a variation of normal. Okay. Because, like between 20 and 30% of women have it at any one time. Yeah. During pregnancy, in case anyone's worried, during pregnancy, the baby's not going to grow towards your spine. During pregnancy, the uterus, as the uterus expands, it tilts into the space that it has. So it actually goes forward. So I hope no one who's been told they have a retroverted uterus is worried about pregnancy right now, because no, that just resolves during pregnancy itself. So sometimes women with a retroverted uterus have that condition, not just as like a variation of normal that may be genetic, but they have it because they have scarring in their pelvis. So if they have endometriosis, if they have had pelvic inflammatory disease, if they've had pelvic surgery, or maybe if they have fibroids inside, that can cause the uterus to tilt back. And with things like endometriosis or surgery, if you have adhesions, it can get kind of stuck there. If you have one of these underlying conditions that might be causing your retroverted uterus, then you may actually have more trouble getting pregnant because of the underlying condition. But we have no evidence that a retroverted uterus on its own impacts the ability to conceive at all. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect is like, well, how easy is it for the sperm to get there if it's tilted this way and they have to swim up, and instead of swimming up this way, they have to swim and go around this corner here. I don't know how severe your tilt would have to be to prevent microscopic sperm from handling a corner. I'd suspect it would have to be pretty severe. I really don't think that would make a difference, but you might find that some sexual positions are less comfortable than others because of the tilt of the uterus. So some women with a retroverted uterus never notice. They would never know about it unless they like have an ultrasound or go for a pap smear and the doctor tells them, right? Because they have no indication, but other women might find certain sexual positions like more difficult. So if they're on their hands and their knees and the man is behind them, that might be uncomfortable for them. So there are certain things that it could impact, but it's very unlikely to impact your ability to conceive. And that goes for the sexual position, because once those sperm have been deposited and are in place at the cervix, they're tiny and they're good at just swimming around, like looking for, like sensing for that egg's pheromones, I don't think that going this way rather than that way is going to make a difference. But again, it's not something that we have a lot of really hard research on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good to know. So that's it. It doesn't look like we have any live follow-up questions. So do you have any final thoughts for our audience about when they're hearing this different information and they're wondering what's true and what's not true? Any advice for them?
Honestly, it's a real wild west out there when it comes to fertility and the internet. It really is. Lots of people will say things that aren't scientifically backed. Sometimes there's some science, there's a study, and then an irresponsible journalist will give it a really misleading headline. So there was one a long time ago that said women could ovulate more than once a cycle.
That does with the group. I'm glad you brought that one up. I forgot that one.
That pops up every so often because people will read this pop science article talking about this scientific journal article. And the poor researcher behind the scientific journal article had to be interviewed at his academic institution. He's like, no, that's not what my study says, But that article that was done by the journalist is still on the internet. And so there are women saying, no, you can ovulate once and then ovulate again 3 weeks later. And no. very basically, as far as practically possible, ignoring the contested superfetation and things like that. It's basically untrue. But you'll find this stuff online. So my best advice will be to maintain some kind of skepticism, find some trusted sources, maintain a healthy skepticism for the rest. Not everyone wants to actually like read something and then go dig through academic and medical journals looking for the science. So that takes a long time. And if it's not your wheelhouse, like I find it fun, but I understand that people might not like, in that case, try to stick with the very most mainstream of sources for like most things. It's really hard, actually. It's really hard navigating the fertility world out there. Yeah.
Yes. Well, that's a great help, though.
Oh, good. I hope so.
Yes, and thank you for addressing those top 10. Those were a big 10. I'm sure there are many more. So if anyone has any other myths to come up for you, maybe let us know and we can do a follow-up at some point. And just want to make sure you knew that Mikayla is right in your Pre-Mom app. You can find her if you go to more, schedule a consultation. She's under the Fertility Awareness Method instructors. So if you want her to look over your charts with you, if you have some more questions like these that are more personalized to your case, please make sure you find her in there and set up a consultation. And thank you so much for being with us today, Mikayla, again. It's a pleasure.
It was wonderful. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome, and we'll hopefully see you again soon.